Welcome to the Legal Interview Project. We are a collection of teens who are actively working to build resources and informational interviews posted online that help teens who are interested in law school gain resources and materials to understand if the law is the profession for them and how to get to law. Today I'm joined with Emily Anaya from UT Law School, and we'll be talking about her journey to UT Law School and what she plans to do afterwards. Emily, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Zor. How are
Of
you?
Great. Um, I guess just give us a little bit of background. Where are you at UT Law? Are you a 1L, a 2L? Where are you tangentially?
I just finished my 2L year, so I have 1 year left.
Okay, very cool. Are you planning on doing any internships or work over the summer?
Yeah, over the summer, I'm going to be working remotely here in Austin for an organization called Asylum Seekers Advocacy Project. Um, we're working on the birthright order litigation at the Supreme Court and handling matters of like accumulating basically support systems for asylum seekers in the United States.
Very cool. Is that what brought you to law, helping asylum seekers?
Pretty much immigration more broadly, but I would say the vision there was always part of my journey toward law. I always wanted to do immigration work.
Interesting. Since high school or since when you were a kid or like
I would
when did you say?
say so it actually I was reminded of this kind of recently, but I would say the first time I advocated on behalf of immigrants was in second grade. My dad is from Mexico, and I grew up in a pretty white suburb of Houston. So I didn't have a lot of friends with immigrant parents. And that was something that I felt like was important to just my identity and what it was like to grow up as me, I guess. And I remember in second grade, one time my music teacher, I don't know why, but she was like talking about illegal immigrants. No idea how it came up. And I was thinking, like, I know my dad's immigration story. I know that he didn't come here and stay legally. I think they might have overstayed a visa or something.
Mhm.
And so I asked her, I was like, what's wrong with illegal immigrants? Like fundamentally, like what's bad about it? And she had nothing to say, but I was just like, this is interesting to me, like I feel like people
Yeah.
have a fundamental like right to movement. And so that was something that just carried me through to law school.
Interesting. I guess you have a lot of business now with the current administration, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
what do you think, what's been your reaction to the current political state of immigration?
Other than shock, it's interesting, especially starting my career right now. So I went through from undergrad. I graduated a semester early, so technically I like worked for a semester,
Mhm.
but I'm young. A lot of law students have already started their careers and have done organizing, or maybe they were paralegals. So I'm brand new to this, and talking with like my clinic directors and other students who have had some experience, it's very clearly just a fundamentally new era for immigration in the United States. And the fear is that some guardrails are going to be taken down in ways that going forward into future administrations is going to make things continually difficult for immigrants. And so it's weird. It feels like being thrown into the deep end, and I will probably feel that even more when I start my job in 2 weeks. But I think it's important to have those struggles early on because in immigration law, the highs are high and the lows are low, So
Yeah.
we're starting in a valley, but it'll be.
So I guess right now on the seafloor, there are a lot of legal issues that are coming up through immigration. There's due process issues. There's issues of people potentially being sent to private prisons. Like there's a lot of legal issues. What would you say is the most pressing constitutional issue in immigration law right now?
I think so I have always taken huge issue with the deportation or the detention centers. But I think the due process aspect is really frightening.
Hmm.
Um, I went and spoke at the Capitol this last semester because the Texas Senate Committee on Criminal Justice was proposing this joint resolution, SRJ1, and it proposed, and I think it's already passed, it proposed to deny any opportunity for bail if you're undocumented and charged with a felony. So this is before any conviction. You immediately get detained and there's no waiting until trial. And so I went to the committee hearing and I testified and I said, you only get 2 minutes if you're part of the public. And so
Yeah.
I really boiled it down to like, this is unconstitutional because it denies a suspect group of people due process. And I told them that Supreme Court precedent is in favor of this. And it's just like fundamentally, it's going to be challenged at some point if it passes. And while I'm sitting there at the table testifying, some of the committee members are like shaking their head, like, nah, it's not unconstitutional. And I was just so frustrated by that. It really felt like, um, I don't know. It felt like I was not being listened to, and it felt
Yeah.
like this is going to be a real uphill battle. But I think it was an important experience for me. And that's just like one of the opportunities that when you're in law school, you can go do things outside of school, and you should. Um, but yeah, that was a huge learning experience.
A question more on the philosophical side in the battle of education. You're
Mhm.
in law school. You're getting basically a degree on how to understand the Constitution and all of the laws passed from it. But what do you do when someone who isn't necessarily a lawyer or even maybe doesn't even know what the Constitution says? How do you deal with someone who's just uneducated that is in a position of power, like a congressman or a senator? How do you advocate for an educated perspective then?
I learned what not to do when I went last semester. I learned that just stating the cold hard facts isn't enough. Um, and I think I'm definitely going to go back. I think I'm going to take a couple days next semester to go like testify against some other bills as they come up because I definitely want to be in that space again. But I'm realizing that people who deny what the laws are and what the Constitution says have some kind of vested interest, obviously, like it's a pretty basic statement. And I think to access those people who are unwilling to see what the actual legal truth is, you need to really drive home what the stakes are. Because right now they're not upset when other people's rights are eroded. But when they take down those guardrails, one day that could apply to them. That could apply to people that they love. And the rule of law is meant to apply across the board. You can't just start chipping away at it without it affecting everybody else. So I'm going to try to emphasize that next time. It's like, okay, you might say that the rules aren't the rules if it's controlling and governing these people, but it's the rule for you too. Um, so
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense to sort of fight fire with a fire extinguisher, right?
yeah,
What court systems do you want to work in for immigration law? Or do you want to work like at the trial? Do you want to be an appellate lawyer? What's your ideal situation?
I think I do want to do appellate work. I did two really cool things the past couple semesters in law school. So we have a course called patent advocacy, and it is taught by an Article 3 patent judge here in Austin, and has nothing to do with my practice area. But the course is taught at the federal court, and every week you argue a real part of a case to sitting federal judges. So I went and did that. I made it to the final round. So my parents got to come watch, and I argued in front of a Fifth Circuit judge. And I loved it because I loved arguing the points of law. I did moot court. That's the other neat thing I did. I did moot court my second semester of my 1L year. And I learned that like I really like those kinds of arguments. And I think that if one day I decided to do removal defense, obviously that would be at the lower level before appeals. But I think that for me to be able to sustain like passion and momentum, I would need to be doing it at a higher level than I think the stakes are different. When you're doing
Yeah.
removal defense or you're representing clients one-on-one, there's a lot at stake because if it goes wrong, these people are really hurt. Um, and it's not to say that I wouldn't take on that responsibility because I really love working with clients, and I think that's obviously the most important part of the practice. Um, I think that there's a lot of far-reaching impact that can be made at the appellate level. So ASAP is the acronym for the place I'm working at this summer. They mostly do impact litigation. So they don't do specific removal defense on a client by client basis, but because of that, they can help impact policy. And I think that's my ultimate desire.
To impact policy sort of in a district or state level, right? Not just the trial level.
Yeah. So, for example, they argued one case that ultimately led to an explicit, because I think it wasn't codified, but like an explicit length of time that asylum seekers have to wait for work permits. So that kind of thing, like you argue one case and you're helping a lot more people than just your client, which makes it a huge responsibility because if something goes wrong, you're also impacting a lot of other people. But I think that's what I want to do.
Do you want to start your own firm, or is that, I guess, too early to?
I've thought about that. And I think it is a little too early for me to decide on that because there's so much like business involved with having your own firm. And accounting. I just don't like accounting, but um, we'll see. Yeah. I mean, I've never ruled it out. I think it would be cool.
Okay, yeah. I guess we really dived into the philosophical aspect and sort of the practical applications of appellate law. Let's go back, I guess, 10 years or like two educational systems ago when you were a sophomore, junior, senior in high school. What were
Mhm.
you thinking? You said that you cared about immigration law and sort of immigration related issues. How did
Yeah.
that translate into you sitting at your 2L year on this Zoom call here?
So let's see. The immigration and the like, because I consider it a human right. I think that movement is a human right. I think obviously we need to have systems in place for managing it just because there's so many people. But I think it's a human right. And so ultimately, like I really cared about human rights. And that was kind of always just deep in my heart. And it didn't necessarily translate perfectly to everything I was doing, but it always kind of came back to that sense of like responsibility for others, I think. So when I was in high school, um, I was really into band. I was in band all 4 years. And so that's like what I was doing. And I was drum major and like I learned a lot about leadership and working with people. Um, and I think, honestly, I think that that had a big impact on my journey because when you like pick a thing, I think in high school and you really go for it and you like
Yeah.
think about how it's impacting your growth and what you're learning from it, I think you do take it with you. And so I ultimately, because it was like a leadership position for me, I majored in communication and leadership in undergrad. And I honestly think that the major could be also a minor that more people could take because it's
Where did
this
you go for undergrad? What
I
college?
went to UT, so I'm
You
a
went to
double.
UT. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that major, you learn about hierarchies of leadership in different organizations. You learn about the psychology behind leadership, which also means what happens psychologically when someone becomes an autocrat. What happens to their followers? How do followers become unethical because I mean we're seeing in this administration Trump has a lot of followers and he's being enabled by a lot of people. So how does that happen? Um, and it was fascinating, but I think that it only worked so well for me because I kind of already knew I wanted to go to law school. I
Mhm.
think that if you're going to take a major like that, you should also have your thing. Like, what are you applying all of those things to? But luckily, like I knew that I was going to apply that to law. And I think by junior year of college, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start applying. I know that's what I want to do. And so I started studying for the LSAT.
Yeah.
And and I'll backtrack a little bit. While I was gearing up to start applying to law school, I was picking like projects here and there. So for context, COVID hit my spring semester of freshman year, which really threw everything out of whack. I was like working on a couple of projects that were overseen by professors, and it was just like thrown out the window, you know. There
Mhm.
wasn't really, I don't know, there wasn't really finishing a project at that time, at least for me,
So
because there were,
2020 was your freshman year in college.
yes,
Okay.
yes, that was my spring semester of college. I finally settled in, and then we went home. But during that time, during lockdown, I worked as a remote intern for a congressional candidate running in my district, and she was a cancer survivor, and she was an immigrant herself. I think, like, I saw a lot of things reflected in her that I was like, oh, this would make a great candidate. But she was running against a very popular incumbent, um, Dan Crenshaw. So that didn't work out. But it was very interesting to like kind of see a little bit of politics before I even went into law school, because that a lot of students in law school like see themselves going into that.
Yeah.
Um,
How did
and
you
so,
get that role working, like volunteering for her campaign?
how did I get it?
Yeah. How did you get the role?
I found out about it through a friend who had done other kind of grassroots stuff, and I had two in high school. I did a little bit of grassroots volunteering for different candidates, but it kind of was just like a happenstance. Somebody else knew about it and told me about it, and so I tried it. And honestly, that's how many of the best opportunities and experiences I've had worked. It's just
Yeah.
talking to people, telling people what I'm interested in has reaped a lot of rewards because they're like, oh, well, there's this you could do. And then I just do it. So highly recommend that to any high schoolers watching. Um,
Sort of networking and speaking with other people.
And the thing is, like, I always hated the concept of networking because it felt so transactional. And what I learned from that, like, discomfort with it was that it's really just like I don't even like using the word networking. I get it why other people say it, but like it's just connecting with people and understanding like what they value and finding the the ways you can help each other because it's like it feels so good when I'm able to tell somebody else like, hey, there's this opportunity coming up. I think you'd be perfect for it. And that's just kind of like reciprocal, but
I
it
think
doesn't
that's a
have to
lot
be.
more human of a way to think about it. Because connecting with people versus networking, it's like you have a network of people. That's more
Yeah,
like, I think you network at an event where you have people you know almost, right?
yeah.
So I don't know, we should start a petition to change it to connecting with people.
I totally agree because like I I think about it a lot, like the phrase net your network is your net worth, 100% true.
Mhm.
It's so invaluable. And I think as someone who tends to be a little bit more introverted, it feels a little bit harder to do, but it's always worth it. And so, yeah, I totally agree. It's just like make sure your connections are human and like you're not just trying to like take stuff. But yeah, yeah. So that was something I was really glad I learned before going into law school because if you can do that kind of thing and you can talk to people about what you care about and be willing to like try new things that may or may not be difficult, may or may not be directly related to what you do, um, you learn so much more. So where was I? I interned over quarantine for the political candidate, Seema Lajavardian. And then I got the opportunity to be a Moody Media Scholar for Social Change, which back when UT system could have DEI, it was under the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and it was under the Assistant Dean for DEI. And basically, what we did, and I think we could have done more. I think it was also just a newer program, but we just like put together a video for a symposium and we did like this little Instagram takeover. And basically, we were just representatives of the college as, but like specific to DEI. So it was, I think it
Yeah.
was 5 women, and we were all like, had different backgrounds. But that made me think a lot about like what it means to represent groups of people, especially as someone like me who's like, like my dad's from Mexico and I'm half white and I have those like privileges, but also the things that kind of separate me from some of the communities that I like, want to champion. But it also tells you that, when you're kind of separated from that group, you don't talk over them, don't make it about you. And that's something I've learned a lot in law school is I took a course called movement lawyering this semester. And what we learned is like in social movements, sometimes the lawyers can take over. And sometimes it becomes about the lawyer because the lawyer is the one with the access and the know-how and all these ideas. And then the community gets lost. So that's something I really like took to heart is like if you're an advocate, you're not the star of the show. Even if you're the star of the show in the courtroom, that stays right there. Um, so that was also fascinating to learn. So I guess kind of generally those things brought me here, and I've been so your first year courses are all like prescribed for you. They're just the doctrinal stuff.
Mhm.
So this past year was my first year of getting to take courses like patent advocacy and like movement lawyering, where I get to kind of curate what kind of lawyer I want to be. And I already know what kind of practice area I want to do, but who do I want to be as a lawyer? And that's another really powerful thing, especially as a young person going into law, is you're developing your legal like persona, but you're also developing who you are as a person. And I think it gives you a great opportunity to decide like, how do I want to grow as a person to reach who I want to be as a lawyer?
How
And I
diverse do you find your law school to be like? Are you in classes with Marines and people who are different ages, or like what's
Yes.
the composition like?
So Texas law is known to be very KJD friendly. KJD just means from kindergarten all the way through getting your JD. So, like me, but remember, I took like a semester off because I graduated. So, technically,
Yeah.
I'm KJD. So, there are a lot of us in our 20s, in our mid to late 20s. I couldn't tell you what the like breakdown is, but there are lots of people there who are veterans or have had a whole career before this. One of my peers is an elected representative, and I don't know where from, but I got to see her at the Capitol too, and like there are people like doing stuff already, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Um, as for diversity, there's there's some diversity. I mean, like it's not that diverse. There are some very strong like ethnic and racial groups, and so I'm a member of CHILSA, which is like the Chicano Latino Law Student Association, and then there's an Asian Pacific Islander Student Association, and the Thurgood Marshall Legal Society is the African American students, and we're there, but like it's there are a lot of white students for
Were you
sure.
involved in that sort of like ethnic student orgs in your undergrad also?
My undergrad, no, no, but I was doing like kind of extracurricular projects that did have to do with that. So like with the Moody Media Scholars, like getting to talk a lot about race with that group was really like kind of did it for me because especially because it was like in the capacity of like how can we make other students of color at this school feel comfortable. Moody was my college. Um, and then I did a project. I actually did several projects having to do with race. One was my honors thesis. I wrote about the history of Mexican Americans in the United States, and I focused on what I called legislation at the time. I just had no idea what the actual word was. I don't know why nobody caught me, but it was litigation. And I like studied different landmark cases and how they helped kind of write Mexican Americans into the picture legally in the United States. And oftentimes it was writing them out of the picture, you know. But yeah, race underpinned a lot of what I studied in undergrad, like separate from the communication and leadership major. But
Mhm.
I wasn't necessarily part of orgs. I think kind of in part because of that half whiteness, and I don't really, I'm not fluent in Spanish. And I felt kind of like I would be like entering a space that I might not be necessarily welcome in. And I could have been totally wrong, but that was just kind
Yeah.
of my,
That was like the vibe.
that was my vibe at the time. It might not have been their vibe. I might have been welcomed with open arms, but yeah, I was like still processing having grown up in a town that I didn't necessarily feel very represented in. So it was like a personal thing for me, I think.
What was like your student involvement in your undergrad? Like what clubs were you a part of? What extracurriculars did you do? Um,
A lot of it was colored by the fact that we had to go home for like a year. So when we did come back, I was part of Communication Council, which was just the student council for Moody College of Communication. And it wasn't really my thing. But it was nice to like be part of something. So really it was just mostly like um, there was this one other project I did called La Capirucha, which was intended to be a like a fundraising type of org so that we could give young incoming Latino students scholarships, and that was destroyed by COVID. And then there was another called the Museum of Color. We were curating a physical museum for people to talk about colorism through their art. And that was also destroyed by COVID. So, like, it was kind of a rocky time for student involvement, I think.
yeah,
But
I mean that makes a lot of sense because
yeah.
um my older brother's senior year was COVID and
Mhm.
he just said how it completely destroyed like all of the
It,
volunteering and like things that he
yeah, it
yeah.
derailed most plans.
Yeah.
But
How do
yeah.
you find that your passion to talk about colorism and sort of race, how does that play into what you want to do as an immigration lawyer?
I think that most of it has to do with the fact that I just find it so deeply unfair that the laws have been written in such a way to exclude people. I think that immigration is just saturated in racial issues. And I think too that immigrants have become a like a third class, a second class. I don't know. I already think there's two classes, but like they're being separated out as this expendable community. And the more we see it reflected in how our laws are changing and developing, the more I feel just incensed and like this is a just it like I get mad. It's unfair. And that's why I went to law school and was like, I want to know how do the rules work? What are the rules and how do they work and how do they stick? And how do we change them when they're clearly so wrong? Um, but yeah, I mean, people who are anti-immigrant aren't mad at white immigrants in the way that they're mad at Black and brown and Asian immigrants. So
Okay. Yeah. I guess what in your education, when were you, is it sort of a product of being raised, like you said, sort of in a half immigrant community surrounded by a lot of Americans, or like when were you aware of this phenomenon and start to see something and like go up to people and say, hey, this isn't right, maybe we should change this?
I think I've always kind of had that like vibe, at least as part of my personality, but because of the way I was raised and the household I grew up in. But I think it was around high school when I started thinking, you know what, I've been really silent about a lot of my convictions because it's been more comfortable to just pretend. I don't know, not that I faked neutrality, but I just didn't engage in conversations like that because it was
Yeah.
a pretty deeply conservative environment. Um, yeah, and it was about junior and senior year when I was like, no, I'm going to openly uh, volunteer for Democratic candidates. I'm going to join clubs on campus, as small as they were, that engage in conversation about these issues. And it was really kind of like relinquishing like the kind of like control I wanted to have over how I was received, because a lot of times like and mate, I don't know if I'm hyperbolic sometimes with this, but I felt very visible. And
Yeah.
there were other students of color, but I felt very visible as someone who I was a lot, I was quite a bit darker as a child. Um, and my dad was like the Mexican dad. Like, I don't know. Like, I just felt conspicuous. And so I tried not to be so conspicuous. And then I realized in high school, like, I can't change how people are going to see me, but I can just go ahead and be who I'm going to be and care about the things I care about. Um, and that was kind of like a radical change for me because it made me realize that, like, yeah, I'm on the right path. I know law school's in the horizon and it makes a lot of sense for me. And I don't need to try to like stifle that.
Okay. Yeah. So senior year, you graduate, you go to UT, and
Mhm.
you're going through UT, COVID happens, and then your junior year, you said you started preparing for LSAT, right?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Uh, that took a lot of self-discipline. I have some feelings about the LSAT. I think that there are a lot of institutional barriers to becoming a lawyer. And I think that if someone had all the time in the world, all of the resources, they could just destroy the LSAT. They could get a 180. And that's not how it works. If you're still in school, you're balancing that. If you're working, if you're on a limited budget and you can't purchase all of the different, like, they have all kinds of like software that you can study with. Um, but yeah, but the fact is, you have to like, it was my first experience of like understanding that this whole law school process is just applied on top of your regular life. You're going to have the same difficulties of just being a person, and now you're doing something really hard on top of it. So every weekend I took a full test. Every day I studied for several hours on a specific section of the exam. Um, and I just kept plugging away. Like it, you just keep going. And that was really all I could do. And I knew that, um, so I got my first score back and I was like, okay, like this is fine. It was at the low end of UT acceptance. And I knew I wanted to go to UT. I've always been like Texas law or nothing. So I was like, okay, we'll see if this works. But I took it one more time just in case. It went down by a couple of points, but like every test is different. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go with these results I have. And then I started working on my personal statement. So we could talk more about the LSAT if you want, but the
Sure. I
personal
mean,
statement is this whole other thing.
sure. What was the personal statement for you? How'd you find it?
I love to write, love it. So I was relieved to finally be done with the LSAT and start working on my personal statement because it's a project and you get to really pour your heart out and explain like why law school is so for you and you're going to make a great addition to the school.
Mhm.
And it was really rewarding for me because I think I've had like many people, some imposter syndrome along the way and some self-doubt as to like, can I actually do it? Am I going to fail? Am I going to fall just short? And so writing the personal statement kind of feels like I don't know, like cheering yourself on because you're saying like these are all the reasons you're gonna want me. Um, which
Yeah,
you
I
like,
don't know if you can get statistics from this, but I recently heard from a philosophy professor that there's like this idea of the curse of intellect that certain people, like not just some people have imposter syndrome, but it's like a part of the deal that like if you are preset with intellect, you're going to have like some amount of imposter syndrome. I don't know. I think it's the philosophical mind goes towards like mapping out different things and you had a graph and everything, but I think that it is like a true part of being just someone with different abilities, right? If you were the best guy to chop down a tree, you might
mhm.
have a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Like, I think it's just something innately human about thinking that the person right below you is the right guy for the job. So,
It's kind of endearing too, right? And I love that it's a little bit self-congratulatory because it's
yeah.
like, well, I'm having these fears because I'm really just so good. And it's funny because like, yeah, I mean, I think that that's also a sign of somebody who is right for the job because if you know, if the guy who's the best guy to chop down the tree doesn't think that there are really high standards for doing so and doesn't think that he needs to follow all protocol and like be perfect at it, then you know something could go quite wrong.
Yeah, during the Civil War, there was a general who he kept asking for more reinforcement. He kept overestimating what the enemy had. And he was very adamant that I'm the right guy for the job. You just need to send me more and more troops. And like
Yeah,
eventually he lost his Stonewall a few times and
mhm.
Lincoln just fired him. And then like those people, like you can very much stifle yourself in a cycle of imposter syndrome. So I think
Yeah.
that it's very human, but
Mhm.
the sign of a good leader, and let me know like what your thoughts are on this. I think the sign of a good leader is once you have imposter syndrome, how do you respond to it? And then there's
Yeah.
like egoism and there's a practical approach to leadership. So
Yeah, 100%. So there are a lot of personalities in law school. I think they, like we learned earlier, type A tends to dominate. Um, And with that comes a lot of really, at least seemingly, self-assured people. And being someone who has never been like openly, I don't know, egotistical feels so negative, but like I've never been one to like openly promote or applaud myself. It just feels uncomfortable. Um, you will find people that do that very comfortably. And it's a superpower is the thing. So even if someone is like, you know, maybe hyping themselves up a bit too much for your taste, it does a lot in this field because it assures other people of the self-assurance of I know I have the skills, I have the know-how, and I have the work ethic to get this done, and I'm the best person for the job. And that's what tells a client that they can trust you. So I think that what I've learned from that is that there is a fine line you kind of have to walk of like, you know, in your head, you should absolutely entertain a little bit of self-doubt because it makes you more careful. It makes you depend on your resources more rather than just trying to brazenly get through it on your own. But learn to build that self-assurance so that you can present yourself in a way that reflects who you really have earned the right to be, which is an advocate. And so, yeah, I think it's funny. I think as you interact with people at different ends of the spectrum, you kind of learn where your own sweet spot is.
to sort of just be like Harvey Specter, just like right in the middle.
But now that I've taken professional responsibility, Harvey Specter breaks so many rules. But
Yeah.
yeah, other than that, yeah.
I think it would be interesting if we get like a legal synopsis of all of the laws broken in Suits. And I've heard
Oh,
that
yeah.
there's like a new Suits. I've heard it's a lot worse than the
Really?
original. Yeah.
Is it like in LA? Is that what I
Yeah.
saw?
I think they made it in LA. So
Guaranteed rules broken all over the place. Because it's funny. So one thing, because I don't have any lawyers in my family or like extended family, so there were certain things I just kind of had to learn as I went. And when you start law school, you like give the board of law examiners or whatever like permission to like start digging into your background, I guess. Like immediately you're like, okay, I assent to being like evaluated to be admitted to the bar before you even like start your classes. And I think one thing I didn't know about law school but would have loved to know ahead of time was that like you adopt this responsibility really quickly um, for following not only the law, as everyone should, but their legal but ethical also standards that are imposed upon you as a lawyer, and you can lose your life over them.
There is an ethical balance between getting a result as a lawyer and
Mhm.
the means to getting that result. What is like, it would be interesting to ask you this question in a few years once you've practiced law, but what do you
Mhm.
think is an unjustified means to a justified end? So let's say, and this is like really ethical scenario type thinking, but let's say you have a case. What would be the point, or really what balance um, what ruler would you use to measure the balance?
I think if it involves putting your client in any kind of risk, if you think, oh, I'm going to gamble and I think I could achieve an even better outcome if I just kind of, you know, put them on the line a little bit, put their
Mhm.
case on the line, put any of their interests on the line. I think as an attorney, that is a huge no. And I think I could see someone like Harvey Specter, for example, leveraging some kind of interest of the client against an even better outcome. Because ultimately, if you're, and like back to my movement lawyering class, if you're trying to achieve this big sweeping outcome, but your client, it's like how every major civil rights case happened. You know, somebody has a specific complaint. So Brown versus Board,
Mhm.
um, Brown has a specific complaint about their case, and the lawyers taking it on want to make a landmark case that's going to help a lot of people. At the end of the day, that client is still your responsibility, and you can't overplay your cards just because you want it to go even better for everyone else because you could really hurt your client that way. So I think that's a hard line rule. At the end of the day, your client is the most important part of your case.
How do you learn when you have a landmark case? Like, how do you know if you just have a case that's a short and achievable victory versus this is a case that we're going to bring to the Supreme Court and we're going to get a new constitutional amendment or we're going to get a new Supreme Court ruling on this case, right? Like, how do you know that?
As someone with zero experience, I think I think it has to do with like um okay, I'm reading through the materials to be ready for my job in 2 weeks
Mhm.
that all pertain to this Casa versus Trump suit. And as I'm reading them, I'm seeing that the other side, the government has said, well, we should interpret um, we should interpret the Constitution in this way, in a way that it hasn't been interpreted before. And they're saying that the whole like under the jurisdiction of the United States means that if you're undocumented, you don't fall under the jurisdiction, and therefore, like all of these things can happen. Um, and what that means is that whatever the Supreme Court holds on this case is going to decide that issue. So whatever, if the issue at stake is something like that, where
Mhm.
it will really be Supreme Court's final word on something that is so sweeping, I think even reading the materials, I'm like, this feels like something that's gonna make a big impact either way, whichever way it falls. It's gonna be something new and meaningful. So
And
that's
then
my best like litmus test.
with a lot of experience because you've gone through the journey, what are some words, just I guess closing words, what would you say to someone who is really considering where to go for undergraduate with a mind of going to law school after? What are some words of advice?
Where to go to undergrad?
No, like what, how to go through the journey, how to get on the boat.
Okay. Um, I think for some people, going to law school is just about getting a job that might be more secure, might um, pay what you want to be paid. It might have a certain level of prestige. It might, I mean, it's kind of a mechanism for social mobility, I think, going to law school and becoming a lawyer, because of that social like weight that it holds. And if for you it's just a job, that's fine. It's we need lawyers who do tax and then go home and like have their own thing. Like that's fine. Um, but I think you should really know that about yourself, and you should know if am I going to law school because that's just what I want to do as a job, or am I doing it because I have some kind of deep fundamental belief system that makes me want to advocate? And if so, I think you should think about all the different ways you can advocate. Because being an attorney is the most visible one, but there are all kinds of things you can do. And I think that for me, going to law school was the right move, because I wanted the knowledge about the law. I wanted those responsibilities that come with it. Um, but if that's not exactly the paradigm you want your career to live in, of like you have to uphold certain things, you have to maintain your license, all of these things, you can pursue all of these deep passions for yourself in another way. So I think that starting with knowing, do you want to be a lawyer because that's the kind of job you want to have, or because that's the life you want to have, of advocacy, then you can kind of decide, like, okay, is it the place for me? Because I think a lot of people can be pretty quick to say, yeah, law school, that makes total sense, I'll do it. But I think it should be a lot more thoughtful. And I think that doing that for me and still deciding that it was a yes made it all the more certain for me. So if it's your yes, then perfect. But definitely do that analysis first.